What's up, everyone? Sorry. Let's just erase that from our minds. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to ELA 1 with Mr. Williamson, your favorite class of the day. Exciting stuff. I know there were some tech issues at the end of last week with the lesson. Don't really know what happened. Hopefully we figured it out. But if you don't know yet, Piggy, our boy Piggy, is dead. His head got smashed by a rock that Roger lifted and threw off the mountain, hit him. RIP in peace, Piggy. So if you think the action is done, you're wrong. So we have 2 days left of the book, today and tomorrow. So I encourage you guys to focus in with me, get with me, lock in, so that way we can finish strong and get to the thing that we're doing next. So we're going to start off, as usual, with the quote of the day. I did not change it from last time, but I think it's still very important. When there's a lack of honor in the government, think of like the leaders, the morals of the whole people are poisoned. So today, specifically, we're going to be looking at what happens to a group of people when they're being led by someone who is lacking honor or morals. And that brings us to our daily objective. I can describe Jack's plan for Ralph and explain why the other boys obey him. So today we're going to be taking a very specific look into why on earth these boys would obey Jack's his commands, even though they seem very violent, aggressive, not what they would normally do. So that is our goal for today. By the end, describe his plan and explain why the people is obeying him. So what I need you to do now is go ahead and get your books and open them to page 183. Remember, when you read with me, you become a better reader. Not only that, but I'm going to ask you to go back and get some quotes for the day. So you're going to need that book out. Our focus for these pages: how is Ralph processing the death of Piggy? So he's kind of escaped the savage tribe. How's he processing what just happened? Kind of what's going on inside his mind. That's what I want you to focus on as we read these 4 pages. Okay, so we're going to start on chapter 12, Cry of the Hunters. Ralph lay in a cupboard, wondering about his wounds. The bruised flesh was inches in diameter over his right ribs, with a swollen and bloody scar where the spear had hit him. His hair was full of dirt and tapped like the tendrils of a creeper. All over, he was scratched and bruised from his flight through the forest. By the time his breathing was normal again, he had worked out the bathing these injuries would have to wait. How could you listen for naked feet if you were splashing in water? How could you be safe by the little stream or on the open beach? Ralph listened. He was not really far from the castle rock, and during the first panic he had thought he heard sounds of pursuit, but the hunters had only sneaked into the fringes of the greenery, retrieving spears perhaps, and then had rushed back to the sunny rock as if terrified of the darkness under the leaves. He had even glimpsed one of them, striped brown, black, and red, and had judged that it was Bill. But really, thought Ralph, this was not Bill. This was a savage whose image refused to blend with that ancient picture of a boy in shorts and shirt. Okay, so we're going to reread this from the passage we just read. When Ralph encounters one of the savages, he said he even had a glimpse of one of them, striped brown, black, and red, and had judged that it was Bill. But really, thought Ralph, this was not Bill. This was a savage whose image refused to blend with that ancient picture of a boy in shorts and shirt. So my question to you, what does Ralph mean by this was not Bill? Why is this image of a boy in shorts and shirt? So a boy in shorts and shirt is probably a reference to like how they looked when they first got to the island. They were still in like their little boarding school outfit and shorts and a shirt. So why is that image of a boy in shorts and shirt described as ancient? Go ahead and answer this question in 2 to 3 sentences now. Okay, so Ralph is observing when he says this was not Bill, that Bill's identity seemed to have changed since joining Jack's tribe. He's no longer Bill, he's now a savage. A boy in shorts and shirt is what they looked like when they were still civilized. Ralph refers to that image as an ancient picture because the boys seemed so far removed from their civilized ways, now slipping into complete savagery. Okay, so we now continue, starting at the last paragraph at the bottom of 183, the afternoon died away. The afternoon died away. The circular spots of sunlight moved steadily over green fronds and brown fiber, but no sound came from behind the rock. At last, Ralph wormed out of the ferns and sneaked forward to the edge of that impenetrable thicket that fronted the neck of land. He peered with elaborate caution between branches at the edge and could see Robert sitting on guard at the top of the cliff. He held a spear in his left hand and was tossing up a pebble and catching it again with his right. Behind him, a column of smoke rose thickly, so that Ralph's nostrils flared and his mouth dribbled. He wiped his nose and mouth with the back of his hand for the first time since the morning felt hungry. The tribe must be sitting round the gutted pig, watching that fat ooze and burn among the ashes. They would be intent. Another figure, an unrecognizable one, appeared by Robert and gave him something, then turned and went back behind the rock. Robert laid his spear on the rock beside him and began to gnaw between his raised hands. So the feast was beginning, and the watchman had been given his portion. Ralph saw that for the time being he was safe. He limped away through the fruit trees, drawn by the thought of the poor food, yet bitter when he remembered the feast. Feast today, and then tomorrow. He argued unconvincingly that they would let him alone, perhaps even make him an outlaw. But then the fatal, unreasoning knowledge came to him again. The breaking of the conch and the deaths of Piggy and Simon lay over the island like a vapor. These painted savages would go further and further. Then there was that indefinable connection between himself and Jack, who therefore would never let him alone. Never. He paused, sun-flecked, holding up a bough, prepared to duck under it. A spasm of terror set him shaking and cried aloud, "No, they're not as bad as that. It was an accident." He ducked under the bough, ran clumsily, then stopped and listened. He came to the smashed acres of fruit and ate greedily. He saw two little ones, and not having any idea of his own appearance, wondered why they screamed and ran. When he had eaten, he went toward the beach. The sunlight was slanting now into the palms by the wrecked shelter. There was the platform and the pool. The best thing to do was to ignore this leaden feeling about the heart and rely on their common sense, their daylight sanity. Now that the tribe had eaten, the thing to do was to try again. And anyway, he couldn't stay here all night in an empty shelter by the deserted platform. His flesh crept and he shivered in the evening sun. No fire, no smoke, no rescue. He turned and limped away through the forest toward Jackson's of the island. The slanting sticks of sunlight were lost among the branches. At length he came to a clearing in the forest where the rock prevented vegetation from growing. Now it was a pool of shadows, and Ralph nearly flung himself behind a tree when he saw something standing in the center. But then he saw that the white face was bone, and that the pig's skull grinned at him from the top of his stick. He walked slowly into the middle of the clearing and looked steadily at the skull that gleamed as white as ever the conch had done, and seemed to jeer at him cynically. An inquisitive ant was busy in one of the eye sockets, but otherwise the thing was lifeless. Or was it? Little prickles of sensation ran up and down his back. He stood, the skull about on level with his face, and held up his hair with two hands. The teeth grinned. The empty socket seemed to hold his gaze masterfully and without effort. What was it? The skull regarded Ralph like one who knows all the answers and won't tell. A sick fear and rage swept him. Fiercely, he hit out at the filthy thing in front of him that bobbed like a toy and came back, still grinning into his face, so that he lashed and cried out in loathing. Then he was licking his bruised knuckles and looking at the bare stick, while the skull lay in two pieces, its grin now 6 feet across. He wrenched the quivering stick from the crack and held it as a spear between him and the white pieces. Then he backed away, keeping his face to the skull that lay grinning at the sky. When the green glow had gone from the horizon and night was fully accomplished, Ralph came again to the thicket in front of the castle rock. Peeping through, he could see that the height was still occupied, and whoever was up there had a spear at the ready. He knelt among the shadows and felt his isolation bitterly. They were savages, it was true. But they were hunters. But they were human, and the ambushing fears of the deep night were coming on. Final two questions to you. Ralph, consider Ralph's statement when thinking about what the savages did to Piggy. He thinks to himself, no, they're not as bad as that. It was an accident. So saying that the savages aren't as bad as that. They wouldn't have intentionally murdered Piggy. It was an accident. Question one, really quickly, do you agree that the death of Piggy was an accident? Ralph struggles to believe that Roger would intentionally murder Piggy, although it was definitely done on purpose. So Ralph is like trying not to believe that it was done on purpose, but it most definitely was, which brings me into the second question. What would it suggest about Ralph and his beliefs if he did not truly believe it was an accident, but he was just trying to convince himself that it was? Why might he do this? So realistically, we know it wasn't an accident, Piggy's death. So why is he trying to convince himself that it was an accident, even though we know it wasn't? Why might he do this? Answer that in at least 2 sentences now. So if Ralph is trying to convince himself that Piggy being murdered was an accident, it is likely because he is trying to keep faith in humanity and to believe in man's inherent goodness. He's trying to hide from the thought that the savages would intentionally murder someone. And this is a way of still thinking of humans as good, despite all the things he's seen.